This is Fanboy Vs Transformers. With Chris, Rob Clay, Brickonator, and Matt.
All right, so this is Fanboy vs. Transformers. We're talking about issue number 40 of I'm thinking last week, aren't I? We're talking about issue number 2 of Windblade. You know, with Ramondelli illustrating these issues back to back, it's getting really hard to tell them apart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just gonna blame that for my brain being mush, since I had to read that like 3 times today.
It also doesn't help that on the covers, the Chapter 3 for Combiner Wars is about 10 times the size of the 2 for the actual issue number.
Yeah, they seem to really be wanting to downplay the individuality of the issues for this.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really help that, we're 2 issues into the Windblade comic, and it's barely been about Windblade at all.
Yeah.
So joining
but
me,
I think she's in there somewhere.
Somewhere. It's hard to tell the way this is drawn. Joining me in my suffering today, I have Mark, aka Brickonator.
Hey, everybody.
Matt, or Melllvarr.
How's it going?
And Rob Clay, or Rob Clay.
Hello.
Where'd you get that username?
Probably the same place Kilby got his.
His mother, I guess? Or something like that? That's
there's
not your mom joke. This is
there's a joke in there somewhere.
But you can hear by tuning into Superhero Time.
TokuPodcast.com.
Yes.
All right, let's jump into this. The relief work on Caminus continues, with the ex-Decepticons making no small impact, a fact that does not go unnoticed by Ironhide. Chromia thinks his surprise that they're being helpful is representative of Cybertron's post-war social problems, and Ironhide brings up Chromia's past crimes to prove that no one is above making mistakes. But Chromia feels more and more like contacting Cybertron was the real mistake. Their conversation is kind of cut short, though, as Devastator emerges through the space bridge and issues an ultimatum. All Cybertronians are to go home or die. Ironhide tries to talk Prowl down, but it's not getting anywhere. And emboldened by Chromia standing up to Devastator, Sparkstalker opens fire and sets off a battle. On Cybertron, the shuttle from the Lost Light sets down, and Mirage can't disembark fast enough. He grabs the first person he sees, Sunstreaker, and asks where Optimus is. Optimus and Windblade are with Starscream and talks with the Camion delegation, working out the details of the new council that Optimus proposed in Starscream's name. Mirage takes off, and First Aid is baffled that Optimus really is on Cybertron right now. Mirage tries to give a warning about his vision as soon as he enters the meeting room, but he's interrupted. Chromia is calling for backup to deal with Devastator, at which point Starscream accuses Optimus of trying to stage a coup. Optimus decides to go and deal with it, and the Protectobots volunteer to join him. So, back on Caminus, Ironhide, Chromia, and the ex-cons aren't having any kind of success against Devastator. But Superion finally arrives, and it's time for a rematch between the 2 combiners. Superion's fairly clever, but still not quite mentally equal to Devastator. Superion's more modular structure proves a slight advantage, and Superion is able to do some actual damage to Devastator, but is ultimately incapacitated. Optimus and company arrive at the space bridge room just in time to watch Devastator drag Superion through, and then turn and start trying to break the space bridge. On the other side, Ironhide and Chromia rally the Decepticons, and they all charge through the bridge and focus their attack on the areas damaged by Superion. While it's not very effective, it creates a distraction just long enough. Starscream produces the Enigma, first using its power to recover the damaged aerial bots, but one of the Camion representatives says it won't be enough since Superion was already defeated once. Starscream agrees and conscripts the Protectobots. As they finish combining for the first time, Starscream orders them to forget their personal feelings because they're the last hope and the only thing that can stop Devastator. Superion continues adapting to Devastator's attacks and coordinates with Defensor to deliver an unconventional death blow to Devastator through the weak point Superion made in his back earlier. So the Constructicons are disabled and Prowl is heavily damaged. Starscream orders them arrested and intends on having them executed for treason. Optimus isn't having this, though, and orders Starscream away from them. Starscream accuses him of giving them preferential treatment and says Optimus has no authority. Windblade submits that no crime has been committed against Cybertron. Only Caminus was harmed by Prowl's actions, so Starscream doesn't exactly have authority to issue charges either. Windblade asserts her rights as representative of Caminus and requests Prowl and the Constructicons be detained until a trial can be arranged. Starscream complies, and as Prowl is dragged away with his team, he screams that nothing will ever change. In the aftermath, one of the Camion delegates turns to Starscream, asking for a combiner to be stationed on Caminus full-time, and Starscream is only too happy to grant their request and have Caminus come to more and more rely on him. So, I think the first question is, do we understand Prowl any better after this issue?
I'm not sure Prowl understands Prowl any better after this issue.
Well, that's a good point. Yep. Like, we were talking about this at the end of the last issue, and it doesn't seem like what Prowl's doing makes a lot of sense with itself still.
No, we really need his motivation spelled out a little better, which sounds like a thing that could happen next issue, because he's going to end up, I'm sure, talking to somebody while he's sitting in prison. But
Probably.
At the moment, not making a ton of sense.
Maybe he will be conveniently put in the cell next to Swindle.
Sure, why not?
That seems like the only way we could really motivate more story out of this at this point.
Yeah.
No, like, I really think what we were coming up with at the end of last episode is probably kind of on point. You know, Prowl wanted to make Cybertron conform to his way of thinking, and now that's not possible. It's just like, let it burn to the ground.
Yeah.
And, you know, don't take everybody else with this time.
Hmm.
I mean, that's kind of what I'm getting out of this, as I've sat for many hours today and tried to puzzle out what the hell's going on. You know, I mean, no, you're right. It's not being spelled out very clearly right now, and we really need that to happen, since this is kind of an important part of the whole story that's been being built up for the last year.
Yeah.
Like, not just in this story arc, but, you know, everything preceding it has been focused on Prowl and the Constructicons and what's happening with them. And we kind of, like, it looks like they're trying to push to resolution on that in some capacity, but we really need this to be more spelled out, because, you know, we've been paying a lot of attention to this, and even we can't make heads or tails of it, really.
Yeah.
So, hey, remember that time Chromia killed those people?
Yep.
Good times.
Yeah. Nobody really seems to care that happened.
No, well, who in this book has not killed a lot of people? I mean, seriously.
Yeah, but, like, you know, Chromia killed civilians, albeit accidentally, by trying to manipulate Windblade to go home.
Yeah.
And there has been no real repercussions from that, except that Windblade doesn't like her very much anymore.
Yeah.
You know, and that, like, they're pointing to that a lot, but there's still nothing developing out of that.
Yeah. I have a feeling we'll get more development out of that after Combiner Wars is over. You know, as usual, everything interesting is in holding patterns while we do the crossover.
Yeah, I guess. And, I mean, I guess there's an excuse for this not being picked up on much before, since there hasn't been a lot of time to focus on Windblade since all this has been being set up. But it's still... it's still rubbing me the wrong way that this is just kind of being let to sit there and nothing's happened.
Yeah.
It's a little bit funny that she ends up saying that there's, like, you know, it's 3 days after we made contact and this giant combiner attacked us. That's the way you Cybertronians are. And, you know, she was probably on Cybertron for 5 or 6 days before she blew up some random people, you know, so she's seen a little hypocritical there, maybe.
I think she was there for like 6 months.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think
time is iffy,
yeah. Yeah, that was part of the whole, like, 6 months later block of books after Dark Cybertron.
Right.
No, I'm sure she would have been fine with this if Menasor had waited 6 months after the space bridge was open to come and start smashing things up.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it would have been totally understandable. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
Things happen, right?
Yeah,
right?
Once the waiting period's over, the paperwork is approved, then you smash the city.
It's the probationary period.
You know, this is why everybody hates Godzilla. He never waits for the paperwork.
Yeah, I know, right?
This does bring up an interesting thing where they're using the term Cybertronian to mean people from Cybertron rather than the race, where that word has kind of been used to mean the race for a while now. It's just kind of an interesting distinction. I mean, even Starscream even calls Chromia an alien at one point, which is it's kind of interesting to see.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Prowl does too, also.
Well, and I mean, they use that in the first Windblade miniseries too. So, I mean, the idea that people of Cybertron are looking at the people from the Lost Colonies as not even being the same... I don't know if I want to say species, but, like, racially different from Cybertronians. I mean, that's not a new concept, but it's something that makes sense as this is being developed more.
Yeah.
Like, there's going to be a schism just because the cultures have developed so differently, even between these two worlds. And if this keeps getting explored and we see other colonies pop up, which, I mean, we almost have to if the Windblade miniseries, or this new Windblade series is going to be an ongoing and not a miniseries, you know, it's going to be interesting to see how those cultural divides express themselves from other planets.
Yeah.
And, you know, then we get more Cybertronian aliens.
Yes.
And then we probably get, you know, a 10 or 12 issue story arc about, like, immigration law on Cybertron or something like that. Because, you know, robot politics.
Yes.
Hey, if they can make them exciting again, that's what we're here
as
for.
long as we go back to like robot politics circa Robots in Disguise 1 through 12, then we're good.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I have my doubts that will be able to happen, but I agree.
Yeah.
So, at the end of the issue, Starscream and Windblade are both in favor of Prowl being locked up, but Optimus tries to, you know, stand up for him and, you know, stop anything happening, stop him from having any consequences.
Because, Prowl totally deserves the benefit of the doubt here.
Because, you know, after he spent that whole time as Devastator smashing people in the space bridge, and Optimus is just standing there calmly trying to talk him down. How ineffective was Optimus this issue?
He gets more ineffective by the issue, I swear.
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing. Well, isn't it kind of the opposite of a superpower?
Well, it's a tremendous amount of inactivity or inability.
like I was saying before the show, I think the problem is, and the reason that Optimus Prime almost always ends up like this in comics, is that if Optimus Prime is an effective leader, eventually the war ends before 4 freaking million years have passed. So, for the war to last that long, somebody has to be an idiot, and the G1 cartoon went with Megatron, but just about everybody else goes with Optimus Prime.
Well, and look at it this way too, like the original cartoon and the Marvel comics, we got that 4 million year number because the Autobot party that went to Earth got incapacitated for all that time. The war was not actively ongoing that whole time. That's happened. True. The Decepticons won by default, basically. Mm-hmm. And 4 million years later, the war picked up again. It's only in the more modern interpretations that it's treated like 4 million years of active ongoing war that has somehow managed to just continue without ever stopping.
Yeah.
Like, it's a problem with severe misinterpretation when trying to reference back to the original material.
Yeah.
Although at least in IDW, the war spread beyond Cybertron, so I guess you can imagine just the constant spreading and spreading and spreading kept prolonging it to a degree. Yeah.
And I mean, if you have to have the war go on for that long, like that's a vital part of the storytelling you want to do. It can't be treated like it's an active war the whole time. Like there has to be long stretches where it's a cold war. Both sides are just kind of going along doing their own thing, but basically with a gun pointed at each other to keep each other in check.
Yeah, and logically there have to be, or at least should be, periods of, rebuilding defenses and resupplying. Yeah, because nobody can just burn supplies for 4 million years straight.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And yeah, I mean, your fortifications fall, your weapons stop working. You need off periods in there to basically be able to keep having war. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I think that's a flaw in the overall way the modern interpretation of the G1 story is being retold. But, accepting that this is the way it is, yeah, you can't have Optimus be an effective leader and have the war go on that long. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if he's this ineffective, why didn't they just lose to start with?
Because Prowl? No,
was
Prowl,
right.
I mean, yeah, no wonder Prowl is always mad at him. He's the one, mopping up after Optimus Prime's idiot attacks for 4 million years. This is why he's crazy.
I'd actually like to see a comic miniseries based on this premise. Like, 4 or 5 issues, and they wouldn't all be, like, consecutive. There'd be stretches of time that take place in between. It's just, periodically you look in and see, well, Optimus messed up again. Let's see what Prowl does to fix it this time.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be, like, an interesting transition, too, because, like, the flashback stuff we've seen, Orion Pack Super Cup, the transition from that to old, tired Optimus Prime.
Yeah.
Like, if he was still doing his Super Cup stuff at the start of the war, that had to be a completely different kind of atmosphere than this.
Yeah.
And it had to be a gradual change from one to the other. Like, there was probably a long time he was effective, in which case we're back to why did the war last so long in that case. And then it just kind of got to, he's getting more and more tired, and it's just slipping away from him.
Yeah.
But, like, he stood there and watched Devastator beating on the other combiners, trying to destroy the space bridge, and still not being able to bring himself to just give in and give the order to have him arrested.
Yeah.
And, like, I honestly cannot figure out what the intent is with how Optimus is being characterized through this, because, the more and more he does, and the more and more he refuses to do about Prowl, it's just, Optimus is looking like an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
And
no argument there.
Yeah, it's not a good way to portray, one of these, like, 3 headline characters of the franchise.
Yeah, especially since the whole book seems to be making the case that Starscream is, wrong. And at the moment, Starscream is not wrong.
No. No! Starscream is out for, like, the wrong motives, but his immediate actions are correct.
Yes.
And, like, Optimus is trying to maneuver Starscream to the ends he agrees with, but I think taking the track of pushing Starscream gently to take these actions for slightly better reasons, like, over a course of time, Starscream would probably be maneuvered toward a more compromise end that everybody can be happy with, and Starscream not even realize. Starscream's the only one being portrayed right now to have the power and the motivation to actually get things done with the society.
Yeah.
Which is really weird.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, 2 years ago we were saying Starscream actually achieving being leader of Cybertron was one of the most interesting things that could happen in the comic book, and that is being followed up on finally. Because he's the most interesting thing happening right now.
Yes.
I think.
Pretty much the only interesting thing happening right now.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't really argue with that either. Okay, so Prowl's line, the Decepticons will never reintegrate. Hypocrisy?
Well, considering he's integrated with 5 Decepticons himself, I mean...
Yeah.
Well, it just all kind of goes back to, his great line from More Than Meets the Eye. You think that just because the war is over, everybody can stop fighting. That's Prowl. The war will never be over for Prowl. And, the book tries to make the point after that is, Prowl's personal issue and personal problem. And, for some people he may be right, definitely for himself, but there's definitely others who are willing to let it go.
There will be a time that Prowl will believe the war is over, and that's when all the Decepticons are dead.
Yes.
Every last one of them, including the Constructicons.
No, he'll just find some new threat.
Well, that'll be a different war, though.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, you're right. There's always going to be something that Prowl thinks is a threat to the peace and security of Cybertron. Right now, it's just, all these Decepticons that are still running around, they're a threat. Then it's going to be all these neutrals that are running around are a threat. Then it's going to be the Galactic Council is a threat, which they are, which we've established a few weeks ago. But, Prowl, that's Prowl's person. Like, as much as anybody else has been absorbed by the warfare culture, Prowl sunk way completely into it. He's like fully committed to that line of thought.
Prowl is the kind of clever paranoid you should never have in charge of your secret police, yet always is.
Yeah, because, well, A, the clever paranoid probably makes the secret police in the first place.
Yes.
And B, you put that person in charge of your secret police because he's the best person to be in charge of the secret police in terms of skill set.
Yes.
Because by the time you need a secret police force, you're kind of overlooking the personality flaws that go along with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you mentioned about Prowl thinking of like a new war and a new war. I'm almost wondering if he's already gone a little beyond just the Decepticons. It really starts to sound like he's thinking all of Cybertronians are a threat to the rest of the universe now, not just the Decepticons.
Well, I believe he used to actively bring up the fact that he thought the nails needed to be watched.
Mm-hmm. Because they're a factor he didn't know how to control.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I forget, wasn't there a line towards the end of the build-up to Combiner Wars, the part on Earth, somewhere in there where he basically said he thought eventually the Autobots and Decepticons would destroy everything?
Quite possibly. That's not a newly expressed view in the recent IDW stuff either. That seems to be a theme that they're developing going forward.
Yeah.
Though if by Autobots and Decepticons he means himself and the Constructicons, then yeah, I could totally see that happening.
Well, Autobot and Decepticons, yeah. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to say about Prowl is that I wonder if some of it is getting lost in delivery. Like, we're reading a comic here, which doesn't obviously necessarily have the same strengths that like a voiced thing could have or an acted thing. And I just wonder if we would see more if he's clearly gone insane or if he's clearly just desperate, if there's something missing. There's an example I remember with Beast Machines, of all things, where when Rhinox sort of went to the dark side, if you will, the original one of the scenes there was supposed to have him speaking, rather calmly, but instead the voice actor did it like really off the wall, completely insane. And so a lot of people interpreted that, Rhinox had kind of gone insane, that he didn't somewhat willingly become Tankor at that point. I just wonder if there's something maybe with Prowl here that we're missing or the writers didn't quite do to convince us where he is.
That's a good point, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, in any in any form of text, you're bringing a lot of your own preconceptions to the interpretation. With comics, it's a little easier because a good artist can convey some of what's lost in, what's lost in the conversion from thought to print. Of course, we don't have that benefit in the last couple issues.
Yeah.
The way I take it is that Prowl is speaking, for the most part, completely calmly, rationally collected, because Prowl does firmly believe in what he's doing, that it's the right thing, and that if anybody disagrees with him, they just don't know what they're talking about, or they have not seen the truth yet. It's not until the end of this that you really see clearly Prowl is screaming insane.
Yeah.
So, I think that's the author intent of this, is that Prowl is supposed to come across completely rational and, believable to a degree, too. Because, his point that the Cybertronians are not only going to probably destroy the civilization of the colony worlds they get involved with, but, everything out around that in the galaxy also, he's probably not completely wrong.
Yeah. I'm sure that one of the things he is afraid of, and the line in this about no world is yours, Decepticon, is that contact with the other worlds is just going to give them the resources and manpower for a war to start all over.
Right, because, again, Prowl's whole mindset is the war never ends.
Yeah.
And somebody on the opposite side of the coin could look at this and say, there is a whole civilization of people who are willing to accept the Decepticon equality that was the basis of what the Decepticons were in the first place, and that could alleviate the need for a war to ever come up again, at least on those issues.
Yeah.
There is always going to be the troublemaker Decepticons that want to pursue power and resources for themselves. And, with a mass number of neutrals or otherworld military forces put against them, I don't think it's going to be able to escalate into a full war again. But, the stuff Prowl is doing is kind of making it where the war is going to be easier to happen because he's keeping everything separated.
Yeah.
So, his whole goal, Prowl wants to win the war, but the way he's doing it is just going to make more war happen because that's all he knows.
Yeah.
Prowl's still trying to win the war that's already over.
Yes.
Yeah. And he's threatening 2 or 3 more in the process.
Mm-hmm.
The way Barber writes Prowl is potentially really interesting. Because, Barber has said Prowl is, his favorite character ever. So you can get from this that he has a really clear idea in his head of how he wants to write Prowl, who he wants Prowl to be in this world. And, it seems like that's getting hamstrung over and over again, and every time it has to start over from scratch, something more gets lost from the original interpretation, and it starts making less and less sense. If he could be, let go from start to finish on this Prowl track, I think we could get something really interesting out of it. The way it is, though, is just getting to be confusing and unfocused.
Yeah, because we've been trying to figure out who Prowl is for almost 4 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, then it turned out, he was, under Bombshell's control. Then, Dark Cybertron happens. Then now this is going on. So we're not actually getting anywhere with this storyline.
Right, and it looks like where this might be going too is that he's being influenced unknowingly by Devastator, the composite personality. And, it's just another thing that's going to shoot in the foot any development that Prowl might have made over the last 2 years. It's kind of getting tired.
Yeah.
I have no problem with Prowl being taken in this kind of direction. I just want I want Barber to be able to commit to it without any appearance of being interfered with or hesitation on his part, and actually just committing and pushing through to the end of it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it kind of just needs to drop away.
Yeah, in a way, it's kind of unfortunate that the Barber wound up with the main book because, More Than Meets the Eye has a very good excuse, like James Roberts has been saying, to be away from this.
Mm-hmm.
And, no matter what happens, Barber's stories are always going to end up, in the crossfire when something else needs to happen. And, the partnership with Hasbro, the closer partnership that's happened over the last few years has been very good in some ways, but, you can see editorial mandate kind of throwing a wrench in the works here and there.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're lucky to see Hasbro as hands-off as they are, but when stuff does come up like this, it does show.
Yeah. And I'd almost like to see Barber just give Prowl his own miniseries at this point and maybe get where he's going with this before anything else can happen.
Mm-hmm. Of course, the other option is to arrange another collaborative thing with James Roberts and make a setting off to the side where they both work together on a story and use that to facilitate Prowl. Basically, pull the Dark Cybertron thing, but without the outside mandate of it, and have a little more freedom to actually get the stuff done away from the main 2 books.
Yeah.
So now, Rob, you had an interesting way of transitioning us to the art discussion, which, while it's not really facilitating actual discussion, it's a shame to let it go unused. So I'll just lead in by saying this issue was illustrated by Livio Ramondelli.
Yes. And I know there's things that we, need to discuss, but if I had my druthers, I would just leave it right there.
I totally understand. But...
Yeah, I'm perfectly fine with that, quite frankly.
So, Blades and Streetwise aren't really looking like themselves, still.
No, Blades is still mainframe.
And Streetwise is Grotesque the Monster Bot. Consistently, the whole way through.
Consistent.
Yeah, I mean, it's consistent.
Consistently incorrect.
And they were these same character models in the issue of the Transformers last week, and I can understand one of these 2 books getting through with that happening and nobody stopping it to have it fixed. But I don't think there's really an excuse for the second book of the two to have the same thing happen.
The only excuse I can come up with is that these will end up packed with toys, and there was too tight a deadline to be able to do anything about it to make sure that it got ready for print in time for Hasbro. That's about the best I can come up with.
I guess, and it makes me wonder if like the trade that collects Combiner Wars is going to have this art corrected. But I kind of doubt it.
I still
I
like
don't know
our
why.
theory that... Go ahead.
That just makes me picture like the correct robots like put over top of it, like drawn in by Guido, put in on Post-its.
You know, I would be amazed and like awed to see Guido try to emulate Ramondelli's style and do it right.
You know that he could do it, and I would like to see that now that you say it.
Yeah. The only problem with that is it would require Ramondelli to have an ongoing book, and for some reason to need a fill-in to come in and match style with him.
Yeah, it's not worth it.
No, absolutely not.
One thing I do want to point out, though, just for the sake of saying something positive, is that the first panel of the first page is not filtered as heavily as the rest of the book, and it actually doesn't look half bad.
No, it's just the remaining, like, 3 or 4 panels on that page that are terrible.
And the rest of the book, yeah.
Okay, so, before we move on from this, or before we keep going with this, who could tell Sparkstalker was on page 1?
I thought it was Skywarp, and I was like, that's not Skywarp.
Like, I have a G1 Sparkstalker on the shelf next to me. I can see that head design, the beast head design, anytime, and even though that's drawn on the back of that figure, I could not tell. Without going through it like 6 or 7 times, it never occurred to me that was Sparkstalker.
Wow.
Yeah. And of course, Chromia in the next panel with, you know, this whole cluster of speech bubbles attributed to her. You can't tell she's there until the next panel when she's actually visible.
Yes, because, again, the damn filters, and she just melts right back into the background along with the giant wrench she's supposed to be using.
Yeah. Well, and, you know, in panel 3, you can't even see she has a wrench because all you can see is this little blue blob kind of muddied into the background.
I am looking at it right now, blown up to 200%, and that is the first time I noticed the wrench.
There you go. I will say something positive, though. The panel with Defensor and Superion standing together across from Devastator actually looked pretty cool to me.
Yes, it does.
Like, the composition's okay, the models are not terrible, and even the way it's filtered, it kind of works for the context.
Mm-hmm.
I could not say I would not rather see that done by someone else, but under the circumstances, it doesn't look that bad.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's about the only good thing about the Combiner parts of this, because those fight scenes are just incomprehensible.
Yeah.
Did
Defensor
Superion turn...
does...
Oh,
go ahead, Mark.
Okay. I was just wondering, did Superion turn his leg into an arm at one point? Because that's what I think might have happened. I saw 3 fists there at one point.
You know, you have a point.
Yeah, including the one arm that had just been ripped off was already back.
Yeah,
that didn't make much sense either.
That's apparently supposed. Yes, that is Superion's strategy that he's talking about. I'm looking at it right now. Yes, he turns his leg into an arm and punches Devastator,
while the other one flies back and reattaches in the empty spot.
Yes. Mark, if you had not mentioned this, I had never seen it. I had never noticed.
Me either.
There
like,
are 4 of us.
Like, what I saw happening...
confused.
What I saw happening was Devastator tore the arm off, and the arm flew back on under its own power, and the fight just continued from there.
Yeah, that did happen too, but yeah, while that's happening, in the lower left corner of that panel, a foot has become a hand. And there's even a big sound effect to call it out.
But you don't know what it's connected to!
Yeah. And the fact is, if you need a sound effect to call out what is happening in the panel, if you need a sound effect, if you need words in an action scene to call out what has happened, your artist has failed.
What was no? It's like what's his name? Augustin Padilla in the Dinobot miniseries Maregrid wrote.
Yes.
It was kind of the same thing going on there.
Mm-hmm.
You had sound effects, you had dialogue narrating what the fight was, and you needed all of that because you couldn't tell what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing too is in the fight, in the second or third fight, Defensor uses a rocket punch. Did you see that?
Yes, that's what I was
Yes.
going to bring up. That was awesome. He has rocket firing robot fists.
It's awesome, but it's barely visible. Like, it is so downplayed in the back of that panel when that should be like a focal point, the fist firing off.
Yes.
Never mind that it doesn't do anything.
But when he does it with his whole freaking arm, it does.
Well, that's fantastic. Like, I love that super unconventional, to Transformers anyway, really super robot finishing attack. Plus, there's continuity in the fight, too, because earlier Superion ripped the hole in the back of Devastator to make a vulnerable opening.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Which
with
they-
that, you
was
had to
happening
realize
because I
that was
couldn't
his
tell.
back.
Yes, and that took me several tries to actually make out what was going on there, because at first I thought that was Devastator opening a hole in Superion.
Yeah. I only realized it after, going back to earlier when someone was talking about the, holes in Devastator's defenses that somebody opened up. And that's the only reason I knew.
And looking at it, I still can't be exactly sure that's what happened. So
The only way I actually put it together finally was the speech bubbles are slightly different colors.
Yeah.
So you get Devastator's reaction noise from having a hole torn in his back, which is slightly distinctive from Superion's fighting noises.
Mm-hmm. The other interesting thing is that the most of the backshot page there is actually, again, not filtered terribly heavily, so you can actually make things out. Except that last panel where you need to make things out. But...
Right, that's the thing. Like, the physical parts of the fight, like, everything is just this muddy mass that you can't really pick out what belongs to who and what's going on.
It's almost like the live action movies.
Well, okay, so, like, I think I figured out what Livio's interior work is like here for these combiner scenes. Anybody remember Cloverfield?
Never saw it.
never saw it.
Saw it, but probably wish I didn't.
Like, the thing is, in that movie, you never saw a full, clear shot of the monster because of the filming style used, and this feels kind of the same way. It's dark, and, you can't really do shaky cam in a comic book.
Yeah.
Or you probably could find a way, but it would look even worse than this somehow. But, it's being framed and then colored in such a way that you can't really get detail on the figures in the panel.
It's the same thing that Augustin Padilla did, and the reason he did it is because if you don't have to draw full figures, it is easier to make your deadlines. I am convinced that is why.
Makes
Okay.
sense.
It's supposed to make things dramatic, but the side benefit is that you get the Liefeld effect, and you don't have to draw a lot of hands and feet and waste time on it. I don't really.
You bring that up, but funnily enough, I'm looking at the shot of Superion and Defensor taking down Devastator, and their feet are all obscured by smoke.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's time saving things. I'm to be honest, I think the reason we see so much of Livio is that he is really, really, really good at meeting his deadlines, and that has a very important place in monthly comic production. But as a reader, I am not really certain that it is worth it.
Right. Because, Transformers versus G.I. Joe, we make a lot of fun of it for it coming out, once every 3 or 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
At least it's consistent, and if you like the art style, you're always getting what you signed on for.
Yes, and considering, again, that this one guy does it all himself, you can understand why it takes that long.
On the other hand, that's a very niche comic book, and the same kind of thing would not fly on a main monthly title.
Yeah, and also, again, if we are talking about tighter deadlines so that these can be packed in with action figures, which is kind of what I'm thinking,
Yeah.
then they absolutely have to have their fastest, most reliable person on this.
The thing is, I think instead of doing it like this, they really need to have more like division of labor and have a different person do each issue.
Yeah.
Because they have enough second string, and I don't mean any offense by that, but, you know, there's a clear distinction between the main recurring artist and everybody who does fill-in work. You know, you have that pool of alternate artists big enough that you could do a 6-piece miniseries like this with one person doing each book and have all the work be done virtually simultaneously.
Mm-hmm. And, yeah, and that's the thing I've been wondering about a while now, which is why don't we see more of the people who, you know, we see occasionally? Because quite a few of them are pretty good. And, again, my best guess is that there has to be time to schedule them and time for them to finish.
Yeah, like, I'm sure the reason we don't see Matt Frank very much is because he has a lot of Godzilla work that he does as his main line.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what Robert Gill does primarily, but, you know, I'd like to see him take a stab at Combiner Wars issue, and, you know, there are other artists that we've seen come up I would like to see get more chance and, you know, give us some more variety and give us a little break from some Ramondelli.
Yeah.
But we've only got 2 issues left, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Transformers 41 is Ramondelli again, so we get 3 issues back-to-back of... 3 issues back-to-back, but the subsequent issue of Windblade will be Sarah Stone again.
Thank God.
Is it Sarah Stone or is it Corinne Howell?
No, that's the next issue of Windblade after.
Gotcha.
That's why I was thinking that Sarah's probably only going to be doing every other issue of Windblade.
Yeah.
Probably to avoid the Transformers versus G.I. Joe problem.
Yeah.
Which
And
I'm fine with that, as long as we get, you know, a decent fill-in artist for every other issue.
Have you seen Corinne Howell's work? She's pretty good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, she's pretty good. I'm actually looking forward to seeing her interiors on that issue of Windblade.
Yeah.
Okay, couple last points to bring up before we wrap up. So yeah, like Mark points out in our bullet points here, Rook is just kind of suddenly with the Protectobots.
And he's not even mentioned by name in the book anywhere.
No, like, and he's in the back of the group too, so it's I kind of get the feeling like, you know, Ramondelli got a note that day saying this character needs to be here too, so put him next to Mainframe and Grotesque.
That's what even when even when Starscream turns around and says you 5 will do, you know, there are 6 of them standing in there.
Right, and you can't see Groove involved anywhere on Defensor.
No.
It's Protectobots and Larry.
Yeah.
Of course, this is like the first time they've ever been called to Protectobots, because they've not really been a cohesive group in IDW to my knowledge. It's just
right,
like,
and they
call all of a sudden.
Yeah, they call that out pretty well, just to cover that over. I mean, I kind of like Starscream's dialogue with them too, just before he uses the Enigma on them. You 5 have worked together a long time, right? No. Well, you're like in sync with each other, right? No. Now you'll do.
That's completely ignoring them.
They are the Kyle Rayner of combiners, apparently.
I mean, that's one credit I really have to give this, is Starscream always shines when Margaret writes him.
Yes.
You know, he just really stands out under her.
And really, when you get down to it, if we could get some better art, a miniseries with John Barber and Margaret that boils down to Starscream versus Prowl could be absolutely incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, it could. Well, I would kind of just like under the same conditions, like a one-shot. We talked about this before, I think, just a day in the life of Starscream.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I would be so happy with that. Just as I would ideally like a double-sized one-off for that, but I'd even take normal issue length, just because there's so much potential in that.
Yeah.
Yes, I want to see Rat Trap's focus group.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was actually what motivated me to want that when we talked about that last time. Okay, so before we wrap up, does anybody else have any more points they want to bring up?
I just want to say that if it didn't cause you too much editing work, I would ask you to dub in the Ken scream when you say there's 3 issues of Livio in a row. I know that's too much effort.
But that sounds like it would totally be worth it, though.
I'm
we can
honestly
build a collection.
I'm honestly thinking about it. All right. Anything else?
I just thought it was kind of interesting that the Enigma can heal as well as combine. That's kind of interesting.
That sure is plot conveniency, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that has a lot of possibilities. I mean, you get any 5 mostly alive people in one place, and bang, you got one dude, and he's fine.
This is how we get Computron back. We just get the corpses of the dead Technobots, and then we can get Computron.
I was thinking...
No, didn't you read those panels with Defensor, the way he talked? That is Computron.
Okay, so that's something I wanted to actually cover briefly. Like, Starscream's dialogue and the Protectobot's responses, I think what we're seeing is a variance in how effective a combiner is based on how tight-knit the group that makes them is. So the Protectobots have worked together. They're not like super connected to each other. So you get a functional combiner, but not one that's super effective. Superion, the Aerobots were a really tight-knit group to start with. And so Superion's pretty effective. He's at least average intelligence. Prowl and the Constructicons are, fusing more and more mentally, so it's making Devastator extremely smart.
Mm-hmm.
But Defensor is kind of like basic functionality only.
Yeah.
Like I think that's an intentional thing. I don't think that's an error in how Defensor is being characterized. I think we're actually supposed to interpret from that there is a difference in the input material to what you get as the combiner.
Yeah.
Well, maybe if they put the right Protectobots in there instead of Grotesque and Mainframe, he'd work a little bit better.
Right.
I forgot, what was Superion's dialogue like back when he first came online, way back in Robots in Disguise?
I don't remember specifically, but it was very basic.
Yeah,
I think he was hardly talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The spontaneous fused combiner Superion.
Yeah,
was,
more like caveman.
Yeah.
Than anything, I think.
At best.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because that was a very uncontrolled combination.
Yes.
So, with the whole thing of the Enigma is that it seems to make like the idealized combiner from the people you put into it.
Mm.
But no, like what you were saying about get any 5 damaged people together. Coming next year, the special event introduction of the fan-built combiner character will probably be just that.
Yes.
No, I mean, and to make 5 people become a combiner, there has to be some physical reconfiguration going on from the Enigma. So, I mean, it's not that much of a stretch to say that, in the same process, it can just go ahead and like repair their damage too.
Yeah.
So it's plot devicey, but there's enough word I can't think of. There's enough.
It's justified enough.
Yeah,
justification.
You can rationalize it well enough, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Enigma is just a little too on the magic side for my personal taste, at least.
Well, yeah, and hopefully when Combiner Wars is over, the Enigma will be taken out of the picture, so it can't just be, the next fix everything button.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's going to be our show for this week. Next week, I will be back talking More Than Meets the Eye with Kilby, Rob, and Chris Triplett. So we'll see you then.
Need to catch up? Visit tfradio.net/Amazon and start shopping for collected volumes of all the Transformers titles. For comic book news, reviews, and more, visit tformers.com. Fanboy Vs Transformers is a radio-free Cybertron production.